thank you guys for having us here. I'm here with some of my team, Kim and Gail sets all this up, so we're very grateful. And I'll just kind of run through who I am and why I want to earn your vote. And then really, I think question and answers are when people really get the information that they're looking for, so we'll do that. So, like I said, Paige Beauchemin, I was raised in southern New Hampshire, all over like Manchester, Hooksett, Concord area, graduated from Concord High, and I lived out of state in Pittsburgh, PA for about 16 years, and I've been back in New Hampshire since 2018 with my husband who does geology work, and my kids who are 13, 11, and 7. And of course, I had to move to Nashua instead of Concord because my dad moved to Hudson. And I wasn't moving back to be far away from Grandpa. So we've been in Nashua. I am actually a women's health nurse, and I've been doing women's maternal child health and health equity and mental health since 2010. So I've been working on Black maternal health, gender affirming care, all those kind of things. I like to say like before it was cool. So I am very committed to social justice and helping working people. I come from a very low income childhood. There were times where we were unhoused, unfed, all of those things that go with that. And I think that gave me, I'm the oldest of 4 kids, so guess what, I became a nurse. I'm a nurturer, take care of people, no way, try to fix the problems. But I think as somebody coming from a low income family, I'm first generation college, I always had this empathy. I was an activist and an advocate. I sincerely didn't think that I belonged in politics. I didn't think it was accessible to me. I thought I wasn't qualified, but I always wanted to do it. And in fact, a few years ago, I had a 10-year plan. I had a little binder and all the books I was gonna read and podcasts, and maybe I'll get a degree, because in my mind, I had to have like a master's in global foreign policy. And so one day, I go to the Unitarian Universalist Church, and my acquaintance came out. She had a legislative plate, and I lost my mind. I was like, Crystal, how is she a state rep? She does payroll. She's a normal person. And Crystal, being the lovely, she recruits so many people, I have to say. Crystal's like a little magic dem. But anyway, she, of course, had lunch with me. And I'm sure most of you at this point know, because people are learning, but you'll know how many representatives are in the House of Representatives in New Hampshire. Call out a number, do you guys know?
400.
400. Nobody knew this last year. Nobody knew this. And y'all know we get paid less than $200 for 2 years of work.
No, you get $200. They just take taxes out.
And if you want a nice one that you can put on a chain instead of a plastic one you have to pin, you have to pay taxes. So that's it. So anyway, so Crystal told me all about it, and I was really floored that there is, despite it being inaccessible significantly because of not getting paid, because there's 400, it's actually more accessible for regular people to be able to get involved. And that was really exciting for me. And I said, Crystal, stop telling me about this, because you're gonna make me want to do this, and I'm not doing this to my little guy. He's 10 and he's only 4. He was 4. And 2 months later, Crystal texted me and said, I have a really big favor to ask you. And what had happened was, at the time, in the 23-24 term, at the time that I would have run, it was, so somebody had resigned from my ward, and we really, really needed a state rep, because at the time there were 199 Republicans and 198 Dems. So we were losing votes by 1 vote, and my seat would have tied the House. The challenge is that my ward is the lowest income ward in the 2nd biggest city in the state, and I have one of the highest Spanish-speaking wards in the state. So what that tells you is people are working lots of jobs, people have other immigration, they have lives that immigration impacts them, we'll just say that. So it's very hard to get reps from my ward. I'm a women's health nurse, and repro rights were a big deal. That's the summer that Roe v. Wade got overturned. As far as the working person thing, 2 weeks before that, I had just taken an overnight nursing job. And so what really, really made the difference, though, was thinking that the folks in my ward would end up being represented by somebody who was really wealthy, who would not have any idea at all what any part of their life was like. And so that's when I decided I have to find a way to make this work, talk to my family, my husband, we decided to do it. He gave me a hug, and I said, you know, when we do this, it doesn't end, right? And he's like, I know. So I got to the State House, and like a lot of people in my position, I didn't really know almost anything about what was happening there. I had a lot to learn. I was listening to NHPR Politics, Civics 101 on the way to Concord and back. And when I got there, I realized how qualified I actually am. And that probably most of you would be very qualified to be there as well. Because all you need is a desire to help people and the desire to do the work. And if you're a person that can do that, you can be successful and you can make change. What I also realize is that I am one of the only working people there. I know hardly anybody who has school-aged children out of the 400 people there. There are very few people who have families who are working there. So that really lets us know why a lot of the laws are not serving the working people of New Hampshire. So, why run for Congress? Because after the last election, I really decided I'm sick of this. I haven't felt represented in a long time. I haven't been able to look at any candidate, not any, but many candidates. I've not been able to look at them and say, that person knows what I need, and that person is going to fight for the things that will make my life and my family's life and my patients' lives better. And when it got so bad that Trump won, I had it, and I said, that's enough. If we want to change things, we have to get out there and do that. Only 2% of Congress are working people. When we talk about representation, most of us will acknowledge that representation of race, of gender, of other parts of our life are important to make rules, to make things go forward in a society that will work. And yet we haven't really employed that in terms of income. And it's probably one of the most important things that we should be looking at if we want to change things for working people. So I am running because I truly believe that if we want to make changes for working people are the ones who are going to have to make those changes. I do not think it is going to come from who's been in Washington, because it hasn't. We have that proof. They've had decades. And I do not believe that what's happening now started with this administration. I believe that this is the symptom and not the cause. And that if we go back to the status quo, before we know it, we're going to be right back where we are right now, and it could be worse. Thank you. Thank you. So that is why I am running. I am a working person. I am a mom. I take care of people. I take care of my patients. I have done a lot of work in public health. Right now, I work per diem at public health in Nashua. I work mostly with unhoused, undocumented, and uninsured patients, making sure they get vaccines and other health care that they need. We go out to the unhoused encampments. We do wellness checks, try to make sure that people get connected with services. And I tell you that just to say, I don't need to go talk to those offices to learn what the problems are. I know what they are. I've taken care of people. You got to get very creative when you're a working person in the legislature. So I actually spent the summer driving up from Nashua in a travel nurse job right over the border at NVRH. So I was at NVRH all summer, and I worked with some nurses who work at Littleton Hospital. I was at the labor, delivery, and postpartum unit. So these are the kinds of things. And so I know what that's like, right? I sent people home who are 18 years old, going home with a new baby, who are going to a cabin without running water. Can you imagine bringing a newborn baby home without running water, right? And that mom is going home. She wanted to breastfeed, and she decided not to because she was going back to work in 2 weeks. These kids, and I don't mean to say kids, but they're young, they're 18. They're doing every single thing they could responsibly do to get ready and to be good parents. But the odds are stacked against them. And I see that. I've worked with these people. And that's why I think I can make a real difference in Congress. And that's why this campaign is really, really just about affordability. So I will put it out there because it's very easy to find. I am very progressive. I am on the board of the Progressive Caucus at the State House. I was a part, I don't know if anybody saw, we didn't really advertise it too much, but for once this whole season, the Progressive Caucus put sand in the gears. On Wednesday morning, we filed 88 amendments. We started taking there were about 40 bills that had been laid on the table, meaning that we could pull them off and try to vote on them anytime. We pulled them off the table. We would not vote on purpose with the button, so they'd call on us and we have to put our thumbs up or down, and we'd make sure we're on messaging. We had 20 or 30 of us, so they had to call all our names. We got to a point where we were making things so slow, it would have taken 237 hours to get through all the bills. And we did that because the Republicans voted to stop the debate on them. And they knew that if we didn't get through all 200 bills in the 2 days, that whatever was left was going to die. So what did? They put their bills in the beginning and our bills at the end. So we wouldn't have got to our bills anyway. And the goal was to try to go so slow that we made them kill some of their bills. It didn't happen, but we slowed stuff down enough that we were able to make it so that the so-called right-to-work bill didn't come until after dinner, and the Republicans have a much older population of state reps, and enough of them went home that we were able to win that vote. It took a lot of work, and I do want to say, we did that respectfully. We worked with leadership, with Laura Tversky and Alexis Simpson. They don't love it, but we worked with them. We worked with the ranking members of every committee. We didn't want to disparage anybody else's hard work, but we also know that people are asking for fighters. They're asking for people who will do something, even when we don't have the power to do it with the votes and with the legislation. So this campaign, what I stand for, what all of this team stands for, is Medicare for all, housing as a human right, paid leave, child care, and free education, pre-K through post-secondary education. And we want to stop funding human suffering. So I am for abolishing ICE and significantly simplifying the pathway to citizenship. I boldly acknowledge the genocide in Gaza, and I do not take any Israel-aligned money. I don't take any corporate money, any dark money, any dark path money. This is a completely grassroots campaign. So if you want to remember it, I like to say housing, healthcare, paid leave, and peace. Paid leave is one of my kind of pet projects. As a nurse, a women's health nurse, I see that a lot, and so that's something I really focused on this year. I actually submitted a bill for 6 months of paid leave in New Hampshire against advice from leadership, but I knew it would fail, but we wanted to get it out there and get the conversation started and let people know, legislators know, this is something that people need and want, and we need to improve it. So that is the platform, that is who I am. I am happy to answer any other questions you have, but I think the bottom line is that I am a real person. I know what it's like for real everyday people, and I'm a fighter, and I will fight for people. So I hope that you will consider this campaign, and if you have any questions, I'm so happy to answer any of them today or otherwise. Hi.
Will you pledge not to vote for any further aid to Israel?
Absolutely. I will pledge to not fund any other aid to Israel. Yes, I will.
Does New Hampshire,
I'm
you're running for New Hampshire
Right.
legislature.
No, I already am a New Hampshire legislator. I'm running against Maggie Goodlander for U.S. Congress.
Okay.
Go
Did
ahead.
anything happen with the vaccines for schools over the last 2 days? Did they change anything?
Nope.
Good,
Yep, we kept our vaccines.
good.
Yeah.
That's what I said.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Although, if any of you notice, it's extremely hard to keep track when there's 200 bills and they're doing what they call special ordering. So it's supposed, like, we're following along and then people keep pulling bills that are supposed to be later in the day. It's so hard to keep track.
It is, I know.
But yes, that one I am aware of. Does anybody else? Yeah.
Yeah, you obviously have all kinds of energy.
Yeah.
It's good to see.
Sure.
And you've told us you are and will be a fighter. If you were elected to Congress, what specifically would you propose to do or could you do to protect the rights of the LGBTQ community and in particular the transgender children in this country?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So first of all, we have to go back and look at all of the horrible laws that were implemented right during this administration, because I think at least at first we have to go right back. Not right back. We need to at least get back where we were because we should have been going forward, and so to go forward from there, we need to at least get back there. I am a huge advocate for LGBTQ and especially trans rights. That is most of the board of the Progressive Caucus. These are my friends, this is my family. This is very important to me. I actually identify as being in the queer community myself. So these are very, very important to me. I would try to codify everything into the Constitution. Now, that may or may not be as realistic, but that is what we need, is to codify all of these protections and anti-discrimination laws.
You know, we need judges who take the Constitution seriously.
Well, you know, I think that the biggest problem that we have that is the root of everything is money in politics, right? Because when we have money in politics, when we have money buying elections, then representatives answer to their donors and not their neighbors. And then we have people who are making decisions based on nothing that is going on in our lives and at our level.
See, one of the problems I see with that is that, you know, every time elections come around, the voters come out and they try to get to know the candidates, and up until recently, you had a pretty good idea that they were going to at least try to keep some of the promises that they made to you. These days, I'm not sure that the promises that they make to you aren't just cover for what they're really going to do once they get in office. I think they're saying one thing out in public speeches and they're saying another thing at $1 million a plate fundraiser. But the problem is that once you're elected, the voters go back to doing their old job and their routine.
Right.
They don't have time to follow all this stuff. But who has money to follow all this stuff, to follow all those bills you were talking about? It's the people who can hire somebody to do it for them.
That's right.
And they're in your office every day trying to get you to do something for them. There's nobody in there advocating for the average taxpayer.
That's right.
Jeff, I have lower expectations than you do. I just think the president ought to read the Constitution before he or she is elected.
And not just the president, but
Everyone.
Yeah.
Everyone, Congress people, right? And can you remind me your name again, sir? Jeff. I could not agree with you more. People have asked, how do we know that you are not going to fold? And I have so many examples I can show you. But one thing that I will say is that I honestly, I'm up against the Democratic Party more than I am the Republican Party right now. And I am chastised more by the Democrats for what I am trying to do than by the Republicans. Yes?
Can you give us names of who in the Democratic Party has been chastising you?
Well, here's what I'll tell you, is what such an interesting observation I've made going around to these, and while simultaneously going to the State House and being around all the people that make laws and people who are even lobbyists and in that world, And then being out, you know, I speak to college students and I just go to protests, things like that. So not the same group of people. And what I find is that the two worlds literally have no concept of how the other is thinking. Like, we have no concept here with how entrenched our entire leadership, not all the Dems, but some of the higher level Dems in this state. And the prevailing message over and over with really anything that we want to do is we don't have the majority this year, and so we can't do anything anyway. And if we do these things, A, we're gonna upset the Republicans and they'll be worse, or, I know, but this is said in earnest, and they truly believe this. And then the other reason is that the Republicans will change the messaging, and then whoever does what the leadership doesn't want them to is gonna be responsible for us losing seats in purple districts. So that, but this is, and I say this because they have good intent with it, and they truly believe that that's how things are. And yet those of us here who aren't in that world are saying, we want fighters, we want somebody who's gonna put sand in the gear, we want all of this. And I truly believe that there's just a disconnect. And I'm trying to bridge that. It's a really big challenge. You know, it's a challenge because right now the Dems have a very low satisfaction rate. And the reality is we're not gonna win against Trump in any other party besides the Dem Party. And if we don't figure out how to somehow bridge that gap, I'm really, really worried. I think that we don't want to be overly confident in the midterms. And from what I'm hearing on the ground, I believe that our biggest risk of losing this seat is to nominate an establishment candidate. Because I can't tell you how many people I know who are saying, I am an independent now, I'll never vote for a Dem, I will not push the button for genocide. And I'm really afraid, we know that that's what lost the presidency, and it has multiplied so much in this last year. I'm really worried about that. Dustin.
So a lot of what you're saying sounds really good to me if you were to get into Congress. One of the biggest issues I feel that you would have passing any of that kind of legislation is the Supreme Court. How do you see fixing that issue?
I am gonna say, first of all, that I don't 100%, I have not looked into that enough to have an answer where I can confidently say this is exactly what I would do. But that is a good opportunity for me to emphasize. I know that I don't know anything, and if you do have a candidate who's telling you that they do know everything, and that they don't have areas that are their specialties, you might want to question that. I have heard things about adding numbers to the Supreme Court, adding term limits. I think that there are merits to all of that, but I have not looked into it enough to be able to answer. I'm interested in your thoughts on it, and what I will say is I've worked by the bedside, but I've also worked in outpatient clinics. I've worked in a lot of public health positions where I built the programming, and I worked in health tech actually for I worked at Walgreens in their corporate office. So I've managed a team of 20 before. So what I feel very confident in is that I know how to identify the root of a problem, I know how to suss out what is really happening, how to find the right people who know the right things, put them together, synthesize it, come up with a plan, and execute on it. So I do feel that when I get there, I will be able to figure that out. I do think also being a legislator without getting paid, and I don't want to use that as an excuse, but I will say I'll have staff, I'll have an office, we don't have any support, and so when you're doing that for free and raising a family and trying to work, I do not have enough time to get into all of them, but I do have a team of college students who are just waiting for an assignment of what policy to research, so we'll put that. Would you tell me what your thoughts are, or?
I think there's a bunch of different ways we could go about fixing it, whether or not it's impeaching people for just blatant corruption.
Okay, well, that's a good place. Yes, I agree with that, okay.
Yeah, to like you said, to establishing term limits and adding to the court, or even there was some talk about possibly rotation
Right.
with more elder
Yes.
people on the court, elder justices on lower courts.
Mm-hmm, yeah. I'm very cautious because I also don't want to make any knee-jerk changes, and so I know we're going to rapidly want to put things back. I also am a very high-level strategic person, want to see where are we trying to get, what are the steps, what is the roadmap, how are we going to do that?
Yeah, because we have Supreme Court justices that have just perjured themselves in their nomination hearings, and there's nothing going to happen to them. I would like to see consequences for those actions, personally.
I like consequences for people. I would love to tell you about a time that, because I like to think of this as me running for Congress, for working people. The reality is that I do have an opponent, and it is important to make the distinction. One of the most salient things for me is that Congresswoman Goodlander did vote for the Laken Riley Act. That is the act that required detention and took away due process. So she was one of 38 Dems, only 38, who voted for that. She later in the summer signed a bill that thanked ICE for what they're doing. And as of recently, her last filing, she's taken $750,000 from AIPAC and Israel-aligned lobbies. She does not acknowledge that it's a genocide, and if you listen carefully, so the part that was a little bit like, what am I doing when I vote versus what am I saying? She voted for Laken Riley, but she's gone on the news as being opposed to the detention centers in our community, which is interesting that she was surprised that that could happen. That's what she voted for. So when we talk about, being able to trust when you're not looking, I have been telling people, if you send me to Congress, next year you can focus on the Free Staters, because you're not going to have to be calling your Congress people in Washington, because you'll have faith that we're doing the right things, I hope. Do we have any other questions?
Sure,
Yeah.
why not?
All right.
I'm very concerned about voter suppression in the upcoming elections.
Absolutely.
I'm very concerned of the intrusion into local elections. And have you given the voter suppression much thought? And if you have, what are your ideas that you would put forth to ameliorate what I think is going to be a very difficult situation in upcoming elections?
Yeah, I agree with that, and I want to be, I guess, obviously I wouldn't be able to make changes for this election, but I think in thinking about future elections, does that?
Exactly.
Yeah, so there's a few things. First of all, I think we need more consistent, I think we need to move towards more consistent rules across the country, across states. There shouldn't be some places where you can, where there are different rules for mailing in ballots, for instance. We need to protect mail-in ballots, for sure. I also think that I'm so sorry, I just lost my train of thought. Just give me 1 second. A lot of what we're doing right now is actually, voter suppression and not building voter trust. And so some of these pieces of, are you familiar with what's happening in New Hampshire with some of the voting?
About what?
With voting, some of the things they've changed in New Hampshire recently?
Very much so.
Okay, great. So first of all, we need to, did the SAVE Act, that didn't go through, right?
The SAVE Act has not gone
It's
through,
not gone through
but the SAVE Act
It's not
is
dead
federal legislation that basically parrots New Hampshire position, which is, I believe, abundantly unconstitutional.
Right.
Oh, it
It's
is.
currently
Yeah.
being litigated, actually here in New Hampshire, in the federal court system. And I think the New Hampshire restrictions are going to fail, and I believe the SAVE Act will fail. But I think we have to be ready for that, and I'm curious about what you would bring.
Mhm.
And you're asking us to put you in Congress,
Yes,
and so when you get to Washington,
yes,
you're a congressperson.
yes.
What are you gonna do about protecting the Hispanic people who are gonna be afraid to go to the polls in
Right.
Nashua? What are you gonna do
Absolutely.
about that?
I think this is a tough time for legislation and the answers, and I do want to answer you, and I will get there. But I think it's different right now, and it's the same thing in New Hampshire, where there's all kinds of things I would love to legislate in New Hampshire. And this year, we know with 240 Republicans and 100 and, or whatever the numbers are, it's like 275, 125, something. You guys know what I mean. 175 to 225. We lose everything.
Yeah.
And, right, so they're passing so many things right now, and so I guess what I would ask you is, or I'll say this, hands down, I would start, just like I said with the other question, by getting rid of everything that was just done, right? Everything that's happened in this administration obviously needs to be reversed. So if we're talking about the SAVE Act, we're talking about restrictions on mail-in ballots, if we're talking about how they are, I'm not sure what the rules are to be able to be allowing all of these bullies, you know, at the polling stations. We need to make laws to make that safer. We have voting rules about how far you have to be away if you are, you know, with your signs or things like that, right? We can make rules to make it feel safer, absolutely. So those are just some of the things. I absolutely also think that we need to be much more lax about the identification piece of things. What we did before, right, in New Hampshire right now, they used to allow somebody that didn't have their ID to sign an affidavit and say that they are a resident, and now they're not doing that. So they're turning people away.
Now, it actually, vote in New Hampshire, if you are a new voter and
Right.
you show up to vote, you have to prove citizenship. We live in a very small town with a very small group of people who vote. There were 6 people who showed up at the last town meeting who wanted to vote for the first time. 5 of those 6 people had what was necessary for being able to vote. They could prove citizenship. One person, 1 out of 6, was turned away. Now, I don't know if that person was a right-wing Republican or a rabid lefty. I have no idea. But if that person wanted to vote, there is no reason that person shouldn't have been able to vote by simply having an affidavit or some identification.
Absolutely.
Or a provisional vote.
Absolutely.
I hate provisional votes.
Then you find out how they
Yeah,
voted.
that's,
That's not good.
We have, the bottom line, we have way too many restrictions, and it
We
needs
do.
to be easier.
so I want you to tell us that as a congressperson, when your feet hit the ground, you're gonna go after whatever restrictions might exist at the time.
I think that the 2 biggest issues at the root is money in politics and voter suppression. These are my 2 top issues because we're not going to be able to make changes with anything else until we change those things so that we can get the right people in. Does that answer all right?
Yeah, you get there.
I'd like to bring up something about voter suppression that it's been a problem, well, it's been a problem for a long time, but it threw the 2000 election, and I swear we would be living in a very different world today if George W. Bush had never been president. But
I'll go back to Rachel.
that Florida election was rigged before the first vote was cast.
Right.
And aside from the fact that they kicked a bunch of people off the rolls, they purposefully don't have enough resources in their large cities for the people to vote. There were people who stayed in line past midnight to vote. Well, that tells you that there were a lot of people who couldn't stay past midnight or wouldn't stay past midnight to vote. and that margin was so thin, there's no question that Al Gore would have been president if they had fair polling in the state of Florida.
And not only that, I was an absentee voter that year because I was in the military at the time, and they didn't count our absentee ballots.
They didn't count.
They didn't count them.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
This is a huge concern. A lot of people, I mean, I'm hearing a lot of this. This is one of people's main concerns, and unfortunately, I do think it's all speculation. Because one thing I say about this election a lot is that it's I think it's hard to judge what will happen this election based on previous elections. This is I know we say this every time, but even more so, I mean, it's been escalating and it has been true. This is going to be one of the pivotal elections in our history. And for the first time, you're really hearing people say, we want working people, we want progressive people, we want things to look different. We are looking at the donations that our electeds are getting, we're watching, we care. People are engaged this year. How many more people do you see at least learning? You all knew that there's 400 reps. People did not know that a few years ago. That was not common knowledge. So I have to be optimistic, because if I'm not optimistic, why am I doing this? I would like to think that there's enough of us who are aware of it, who are looking out for it, that some of that, I am hoping that some of that is going to be proactively at least make attempts to prevent it. I also think this is another thing that we've been talking a lot about, which is community and educating our neighbors and bringing our neighbors around, because I think a part of that, if we look at how many people usually vote, we've been losing voter engagement for a long, long time. This is an opportunity for us to pick up the folks who are under 30, the folks who have been like kind of in the middle, like not engaged, a little engaged, and they just don't care anymore. So they just totally unengaged. Regardless of what side they are, they just unengaged. And then I think as Dems, we have an opportunity to bring back working people, because I think we used to be the party of working people. We haven't done that for a while, but I think there's a lot of them that are disillusioned with what's happening. And in fact, there's a lot of folks who are on the right of center who voted for Bernie. Bernie won three times in this state? So there's an appetite for that here. Can we bring out enough voters that can offset that a little bit? I don't know, but I feel like there's no silver bullet. I feel like we have to do it from every angle that we can.
Do you know Carol Shea Porter?
I know the name. I need to be somebody was going to introduce me to her soon.
You need to track her down.
Right,
Carol
okay.
Shea Porter was the embodiment of the working New Hampshire citizen. She was the lowest paid congressperson, I think, in the last 50 years in Congress. Her annual salary was like $30,000, aside from congressional pay.
Oh,
She was from Rochester, just a terrific populist in the finest sense of the word. So if you can track her down, talk to her.
Very
Who do you
active.
see as I know Maggie Goodlander, who do you see as any other major opponents that you have?
we are the only two in the race. Do you
There's
mean
nobody else in.
There's nobody else in the race. It's just Goodlander and myself.
Okay.
There is another man who is listed, but he and I speak, and he's taking his name out. He just maybe didn't do
Yeah,
that.
good.
Yeah, there's two of us. There won't be vote splitting. It should be a pretty, kind of a cut and dry, I think. Yeah. Dustin, sorry, I had his hand up.
How do you feel about reapportioning the House and increasing the amount of federal House members in the legislature to better resemble the constituents?
Tell me more about
So
with the Senate or the House?
The House. So the House hasn't been reapportioned in 100 years almost?
Well, then yes, we should reapportion it. I don't need to know more.
I think
Yeah.
what he's talking about is the number of representatives.
Yeah.
It was, it was more like the New Hampshire House when the country was first born, and then we
1929 was the
representatives
last time
and-
the House was reapportioned.
Yes, so, yeah, as an example, in New Hampshire, I mean, I don't know if we would get more in New Hampshire, but I cover.
Well, we probably wouldn't, but other locations around the country would.
Good.
Yeah.
I mean, even this Nashua all the way up to Pittsburgh
Yeah.
and then over to right above the Lakes region in North Conway. So it's a lot of area.
Let me follow up on that.
Yeah.
The House of Representatives, the size of the House should be at least doubled, if not maybe tripled, just to bring you would be representing 770,000 people if you win. When it was last reapportioned in 1929, I thought it was a little earlier than that, but whatever. Each representative represented, I think, approximately 130,000 people.
Okay.
In most European countries, such as, for example, Great Britain, members of parliament represent something like 50 to 100,000 people, somewhere in there. Members of the Chamber of Deputies in France represent something like 100 to 130,000 people. The fact that our representatives are representing 770,000 people has huge negative impacts on our whole process, because it makes it much, much easier for big corporations to send out all kinds of crazy stuff, because people don't know their representatives. And if we had smaller districts, if we had twice as many districts, or even 2.5 times as many districts, it's harder to do that when you personally know your representative. But that's not the question I wanted to ask. The question I wanted to
Thank
ask.
you for adding it, though.
Can you tell us a little bit about your campaign organization? Do you have any offices? Do you have any money at all in the bank?
Sure. That's an excellent question, and one of the questions I get a lot is, that's nice that you're running, but how are you going to beat all of her money and power and connections? And that is an excellent question. I think it's yet to be seen, but again, I have to stay positive. I have right now a part-time campaign manager who is a senior at Dartmouth College. He runs a fellowship program that gives higher level strategic positions to college students on campaigns, so that they don't start with just door knocking and canvassing, and vote banking. So I have about 5 to 15 college students who are working on policy and social media and fundraising and getting experience in lots of different areas. Gail is one of my paid staff, and we are in between campaign managers, but we just interviewed somebody on Friday. So the fundraising is really, really hard. And I had hoped that we could do it a little differently than how it's done right now, where candidates basically just spend all of their time trying to talk to rich people. So I have been trying to, I have a very good social media presence, which I think is going to help certain demographics of voters. I have a lot of support. I have reached a point where when I go out in Concord or in public, there's many, even last weekend in Nashua, I was out for 2 hours, I had 3 people stop me and thank me for what I've been doing, because they're seeing me. But that doesn't lead to money. So we just had a kind of a reset this week, and I am gonna start just being on the phone nonstop for a little while, until we can get a little bit more, make sure we can solidly keep our campaign manager. The condition with which we've made for the campaign manager is that a good chunk of their time will be spent on them fundraising for their own salary. Once we can do that, then hopefully, then we build our staff. We do have, I probably have at least 10 or 15 people who do like 5 hours a week or more if they can, that are doing different pieces of the campaign. But it's hard. It really, really, I keep saying, like, Goodlander just took $750,000 from one place. That could fund my whole campaign. I need to try to raise $500,000 to $1 million that is a piece of what I've been trying to talk to people about, is that if we do want working people, we have to start looking at candidates and campaigns differently. You know, if we don't want them taking APAC money, what are we doing as a community to supplement that? And it's a lot of working people, but can we get 5 more people in our lives to give, you know, maybe we can't give $100, we can give 10. Can we get a few other people in our lives to do it? We have to see it more as a team effort and more as a movement, because folks like me just do not start in the same place as other people, and it's really, really challenging. I think this is something that I might not figure it out this time. I might. But I think this is something that a lot of candidates across the whole country are trying to figure out right now. And my plan is to engage those sections of the demographic that I talked about, so the under 30, the unengaged and hopeless, and the working people.
Are most of your people in Nashua, or in Nashua and Hanover, or are they all up and down?
Actually, a lot of the fellows are from North Carolina, and a handful of them are from Dartmouth, and then I have other people who help me from, incidentally, CD1, so Gail is in Merrimack and Kim is in Bedford, but I do have some Nashua people. I've got people really all over the state. I've done a lot all over the state, so I have allies everywhere. I will say that being a state rep for 3 years has really connected me. You know, I do. I have people in every single district, for the most part, that I can call. So I do have some good connections. It's just about having the time to tap into them more.
If you win,
Yes.
who would replace you in your seat, and would it be another Democrat?
In
so
the
we don't want to
state.
lose any other
Yeah.
seats.
That's a great question, and I do get that a lot. My Dem seat is pretty safe. I have one of the safest districts in Nashua. So we're not so worried about winning it as a Democrat or getting the Democratic seat. It's more about finding people, but I am working with people because that's a big concern of mine as well. I know how hard it is, so I am working on that with the state party who's working on that there. We also, like I said, there's a big Latino population there, so I have been doing some work with the Latino caucus of the state because they know that's one of the communities that will help represent their community. So we're trying to work in tandem and really make sure we get hopefully at least one person who is of Latin heritage.
Maggie Goodlander is from Nashua. How well known is she in Nashua compared to you?
So she hasn't lived there since 2008. So she moved up when she heard about the position. She had moved out from boarding school in 2008 and then lived in DC. So she's not actually that well known. I helped work on Colin Van Ostern's campaign last year, and we actually had a letter from most of the state reps and every mayor in the district. We all signed a letter of concern about her becoming a candidate. So I think at least last year, among the folks from New Hampshire, she hadn't been somebody that'd been here doing the work with us. We kind of were like, we've been here dealing with the Free Staters, So I think that wasn't something that we really appreciated. She actually comes from a very powerful Republican family. Her mom was a Republican senator. So I will say that I don't know where she's popular there. I don't know what side of the aisle she is well known for. But I am pretty embedded in a lot of the things going on in the community. I work at public health, I work in the community center, I work with a lot of parent groups, and I graduated from Concord High. So kind of have Concord and Nashua covered. And my whole family's from the Goffstown, Ware, Dunbarton, New Boston area. So I do have a lot of connections. Yeah, and then I hope that I can connect with folks in the North Country. Like I said, I worked in Littleton this year, and I also did AmeriCorps in 1999. I lived in Berlin, and I worked in Gorham and Randolph, and I worked at Littleton School. Actually, I did a smoking prevention program for 4th graders in 2000. So it was part of an AmeriCorps program with the North Country Community Corps. So I lived up here for a year and I also did an improv theater group with high school students. So you do like high school scenarios of like getting peer pressure for drugs or like dates. And then you so right in the pivotal moment, you stop. And as the facilitator, I asked the group of students, well, what happened here, and what was okay, and what wasn't okay, and, consent, and blah, blah, blah. And then the audience gets to tell us how they think these characters should do it, and that's where the improv comes in, because the students get to act it out. So yes, I did that. I don't know if you saw me 25, 30 years ago. That was yeah.
So you probably kind of covered some of this, but I'm just thinking, so if you win, you'll still have the Trump regime to deal with for
Yes.
the next couple of years.
Yes.
And so I'm just thinking, do any other examples kind of come to mind in terms of how you might approach things differently than Maggie Goodlander has, especially in terms of how to push back on some of this madness that we're getting, the fire hose of craziness, and some things that you might have done differently, say over this last year, moving forward?
Well, first I wouldn't have voted for Lake and Riley, and I wouldn't have thanked ICE for what they're doing. Goodlander has also voted against impeachment several times. Incidentally, she was one of the folks who did the video with the 6 service folks, which people felt were very brave. And then they were all threatened by Trump, which catalyzed papers of impeachment, which, those folks were mentioned in the articles of impeachment, and she voted against it.
That is weird.
So, if you look at her, all I will say is, because again, I really do want to be positive, but there's a reason. I'm not critical of Maggie Goodlander because I'm running. I'm running because I was critical of Maggie Goodlander, and I continue to watch her. And so what I will say is, oftentimes what I see her saying in public is not what I see reflected in her actions and votes. And I know it's a hard job, but even if it's a few of the important ones, I would just recommend following her votes a little bit. And you can look up my votes, because I have a voting record too. So you can look up how I voted on everything on the New Hampshire website.
And I guess I'm also thinking too, above and beyond votes, and sometimes I don't know what else I would have done different, it's sort of, but I see Colin, or what's his name, Van Hollen, went down to the El Salvador prison.
Yes.
And some people try to get an ICE facility, or, things that I feel like maybe could be out of the box thinking. I don't know if there's examples of things, not necessarily that she's doing wrong, but that could be done that you'd like to do.
Sure. So I would have just been much more vocal, much more often. I am the kind of person that would try to push my way in where they're not letting us have oversight. I am the kind of person that would go down and do something like that. I think it depends on what the situation is, but I can tell you that in the New Hampshire State House, I have had no problem pushing back. And one of the examples is the one that we told you earlier. I also have been a person who has gone against what the party has asked me to do, and I've gotten things passed that way. So I was a co-sponsor with Republican Senator Ricciardi from Bedford, because I can work bipartisan when someone wants to. So I was a co-sponsor on one of the only child care bills filed last year. And the committee had decided that they wanted to do an interim study, which basically is a nice way of killing a bill. Yeah. And I was talking with all the advocates, and they said, no, we don't want to do this. We can get a deal on the budget in the Senate. So if you can just get it, tabled, then we can just add it to the Senate. And so I was trying to get leadership and that committee, and they were upset at me, and they were all saying no. So I texted the advocates, and they sent every state rep a text right there in the House and said to vote the way I had just tried to get people to do. So little things like that, where I'm not afraid to push back, but I do it respectfully. And I try to let people know what I'm doing in leadership, but I'm not asking permission. I'm informing. I will listen if they have real concerns and it sounds like, oh, I might really risk this bill. They've got this strategy. Because that's the thing. oftentimes strategy. I don't want to mess up strategy that I think will work, but if I know there's different strategy that'll be better, I am going to push that.
You got really involved in because I live in Merrimack, you were very involved in the Merrimack ICE Detention Center efforts. That was really, and that wasn't just about voting, there was nothing to vote on, but you were really involved in that.
Yeah, I did go out a lot. I was on the coalition that helped plan it. I was at all the protests, as many as I could be at. So I did try to take a big role, because those are my constituents. I mean, if anybody should be out there fighting the detention center, my community and my constituents were the ones who were probably going to be most affected, because we are a stone's throw away from where that detention center is, and my community are the ones that would probably be very, very targeted. I will share a story with you, and I know that people have different reactions to it, but it's out there and I might as well share it. During the governor's State of the State address, she was lying through her teeth, and I sometimes yell out and get in trouble, so I was trying to be quiet and not get in trouble that day. And so she said something, and I put my thumb down like this, and then she said another lie, and it just down wasn't enough emotion, and before I knew it, I flipped her off. And then my seatmate was like, Paige! And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. And it was like a second. The Republicans are watching me because I'm a troublemaker, and they want to make us look bad. So somebody was watching me, and they saw it, and they hunted down the security folks so they could go get a grainy picture of my middle finger so they could send it to my Democratic leader and ask me to apologize. So I said, I apologize for making a rude gesture earlier today. And then some Republicans threw our lunch away, our lunch leftovers, so I was like, and I don't think that colleagues should be throwing my lunch away. So then I went online and I made 3 videos. I made the video about why I flipped her off, and then what happened with the lunches, and then how I used that. Well, the Republicans saw that I made a mockery of the apology, and they got in touch with Democratic leadership. And the next week they moved to officially reprimand me, which I think in previous years would be very shameful, I think, and show that you're like really, really not upholding the honor of that role. But I think today is a badge of honor. So they voted to officially reprimand me. It is a vote, so one of the speakers, the second speaker, came up and, we want to reprimand Paige, this isn't becoming, blah, blah, blah. And then they gave me a microphone. And I got to go up and say what I wanted. And I had a really beautiful speech, and you can go find it online. I'm going to put it on my website soon. But basically what I said was, I do sincerely apologize for the gesture. I do try to be respectful. That is, I don't like to swear. I don't like to be lewd like that. And I will never apologize for the frustration underneath it. And what I talked about was that with everything going on, we're sitting here arguing about the civility of a gesture instead of the cruelty of policies. And what I want to tell you is that after I sat down, the whole House gets to vote on whether or not I should be reprimanded. I told you there's about 160, 170 Democrats. 89 people voted against reprimanding me. Half of my Dem party voted to reprimand me. That would never happen on the Republican side. And then I'm the one who's blamed for being divisive. I am right now, as we have state reps who are sending text messages about segregation, talking about the final solution of our Jewish representatives, calling for Andrew Belinsky to be killed, throwing my lunches away. No, the violent things. I am being compared equally. The NHPR article that came out this week said there's bad behavior on both sides. So that's why I laugh when people ask if I'll fight, because that's the one thing that I got all the receipts for.
Not the one.
Well, not the one thing. That is something.
A big thing.
That is a thing that I can guarantee you do not have to worry about with me.
Well, on the upside, there's no such thing as bad.
I do have to say that somebody commented and said that bird was the people's bird. And I was kind of trying to work through like my emotions about it, so I started making some graphic designs and ended up with like a fist like this with the purple finch instead of the middle finger. And then Kim made t-shirts out of it, like a design, and now there are t-shirts with the people's bird somewhere up on the internet. And the first person I saw wearing it was my dad. The first time. So thank you guys. It's 7:30. I don't want to hold you over. I am so grateful for your attention. Yeah,
Can I make a couple comments?
please do.
I know for good people to get elected, they have to get elected.
Yes.
I mean, good people to be effective, they have to get elected.
Yes.
And to get elected, as you know, is really hard.
It is.
And whether you or Maggie gets it, we have to beat the Republicans.
Absolutely.
So that's really, really tough. And with religion so much in our government that, you know, and in the policies, it's based on religion, things like the abortion,
Oh, I know.
and LGBTQ, and a bunch of other stuff, prejudices. It's important for good people to get elected. So thank you for
I
trying.
agree that good people should be elected.
Thank you for trying.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you all, and I've got people who signed up. I'll be sending emails. Please reach out anytime. I really like talking to people. I want to hear what's important to you. If you like what I am offering, please do tell your friends. Like I said, it's an effort. If you're able to donate or you know people who can, obviously that's a big thing. I'm also really looking for volunteers. If you're interested in hosting a house party, that's a really nice way for me to meet people in the community. So if you're willing to have a few people over and have me come and just kind of talk to people, get to know them, anything like that is super helpful. So thank you all. Kim?
Can you tell us the legacy that you want to leave when you get elected congressperson? What's the legacy you want to leave as you leave your state house seat?
I haven't thought of that. I'm just trying to do a good job and raise my family and keep my house while I win
Well,
Congress.
you've left some impressions as the one who's making good trouble.
I think that my legacy will actually be on the Progressive Caucus. I've done a lot of work this year. I am the Director of Communications, and what I've seen is that as I've been out and about and telling people like, oh yeah, the Progressive Caucus, I've seen so many people who say, there's a Progressive Caucus? Like, there are progressive people? And it actually gives people hope. They like knowing that there are progressive people that are standing up. And I'm going to be honest, we're some of the hard workers. So here's who's on the board. If you've been following any of the trans rights. Alessandra Murray, Alice Wade, Keith Howard. These are some of the folks that are doing all of this. And so I'd like to think that hopefully I have moved the Progressive Caucus into the limelight a little bit more so that more people can see the hope and that more people will be encouraged to run and know that they will have a home there. Because that's how I did all of this. I wouldn't be able to do any of this pushing if not for the Progressive Caucus. They are how we work together and strategize, but we're here for each other when things fall apart. And that's how we get through.
Thank you very much, Paige.
Thank you. Thank